Rambam, Osa Melech, Shiamod Mizera David. That king that Hashem will put in place is from the progeny of David. Bal Chochma Yeh Yosef Shlomo. His wisdom is going to be, his level of wisdom is going to be greater than Shlomo. Even though Shlomo in his time was Chochmi Kol Adam, he's the wisest man who ever lived. Mashiach will surpass him. His Chochma will be greater than Shlomo's. The Novi Godol, and he's going to be a great prophet. Korav LeMoshe Rabbeinu. Not the equivalent of Moshe, because Moshe's at his own level, but he's Korov. He has a semblance of that dimension of prophecy. Lefichol, therefore, because he has this degree of wisdom, and he has that level of connection to God as a prophet, Yelami Kolom v'yorosam derech Hashem. He will teach the people, and he will direct them the way of God. He has the qualification to impact the people. Now, it's interesting. When Mashiach comes, there's not going to be an evil inclination. Although there's no evil inclination, you'd say, why does he have to be this level of prophet? Why does he have to have this level of wisdom? It seems to be for him to teach them properly and direct them properly and have that level of impression on them to influence them. His wisdom has to be greater than King Solomon, and his prophecy, his level of connection to Hashem, he has to be that spiritualized person that'll make the difference. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. Even though it said earlier, when Mashiach comes, Hashem will remove the stone heart from our flesh. A stone cannot absorb, but it's very little absorption. We're going to have a heart of flesh. Seems to be that's going to happen with the evil coming to an end. Because what's the blockage? The blockage is what? Is the evil inclination. So once it's not there, you see things clear, but evidently it's not. Because there's what? There's damage. All the years, even if Hashem now, the heart is now a flesh heart, we have feelings. But because of our past, there's certain limitations. Yeah, you got plenty of scar tissue there. Now there's no new infection, but there's plenty of scar tissue. So how do you surpass the scar tissue and all the blockages of the past? Today, there's no new blockages. The answer is you need somebody whose wisdom should be greater than King Solomon. His level of connection to Hashem has to be nearly as great as Moshe Rabbeinu. Only if you have that person at that certain dimension of wisdom and spirituality could he penetrate all the blockages, which are the blockages of the past. It's the only way I understand it. So it's not simple. Person goes and abuses his certain abilities he has. And now the means for that abuse no longer exists, but the damage is there. So how do you go beyond the damage? That's the Mashiach. His wisdom is greater than Solomon's. He'll have a way to surpass it, and his spirituality is nearly Moshe's as a prophet. So he's connected to that level that he knows exactly how to deal with every aspect of existence to teach them the way of Hashem. V'yavo kol hagoyim l'shomo. All the nations of the world will come listen to him, to Mashiach. Shenema v'yo ba'achris hayomim nochon yiyah har beis Hashem rosh haorim. At the end of time, on the mountain will be the house of Hashem at the highest of the mountains. The sov kol hasochel kulo, and the ultimate level of reward. V'atov achrono she'en lo hefsek v'giron, and it'll be a goodness which it doesn't cease. That's not Mashiach coming. That's the world to come. Here he says the ultimate goodness and the ultimate reward, which is unceasing and it's not diminished, that's Chaylam Habo. That's the world to come. Avo, Yemosa Mashiach, but the Messianic days, when he comes, Olam Hazeh, that's the physical world. V'olam b'mikvinogo holech, and the world functions as it normally functions within the laws of nature. El Shamalchus Tachzul Yisrael, but the kingship will return to the Jewish people. As King Solomon was the king, he ruled supreme over the world. both in the physical and spiritual sense. Melech Mashiach will rule over the world. And the earlier Chachamim, the Talmud tell us, the only difference between the present world now and when Mashiach comes, she would Malchus B'vod. It's only the enslavement of the nations of the world that we have to deal. We're under their dictate. We have to contend with all their issues. That's the Sheba Malchus. We're enslaved. Enslavement doesn't mean physical enslavement. It means there are limitations because of that. There are distractions because of that. The influences the world. We're talking about the value system. You could lock yourself away in a closet. But if the world itself is an opium, then that opium is going to penetrate your location and you're going to actually be affected by that. You're going to inhale that. And you become addicted, not to the same degree, but there is damage. We're damaged by this. That's the Shibud Malchus. That they are able to behave and do as they choose, and they dictate, and then the so-called front runners of existence, we are affected by this. But when Mashiach comes, that's not going to be the case. They're going to shed all that, and they're going to recognize, and they're going to come listen, to chart out new paths. They're not going to become different people in terms of whatever they were in the past, that doesn't change. But going forward, based on whatever capacity they have, that's going to be available to them to give up the wrong and to embrace the right. That's coming Mashiach. The King Solomon's wisdom will be kechol hayom, kechol ashvasiyim, like the sand on the beaches. And the Midrash says, who's compared to the sand of the beaches? The Jewish people. So the Midrash says that if you take all the Jewish people with all its sages and you put them on one side of the scale and you put Solomon on the other side of the scale, he outweighs them all. I mean, there's something which is unfathomable wisdom. We're talking about a human being. It's not within human capacity to even fathom what this is. Mashiach is beyond that. He's even greater than Solomon. What do you have to be greater than Solomon? So again, he says, to teach us wisdom and to teach us the way of Hashem. Evidently, you need that because of the past, as I said. There's so much baggage we have from the past, even though there's no evil inclination. It doesn't make a difference. But we're handicapped. And because we're handicapped, how do you go forward? You need that expert teacher, the one of a kind of wisdom, even greater than Solomon, and the level of spirituality of Moshe Rabbeinu, which touches upon that, to be able to break through all these blockages, to teach them that we should have a capacity to know the right path. Just want to bring out one thing. Like Kabbalah Satorah says that any physical handicap which people had, they overcame those handicaps. If a person was blind, if he was lame, he was an amputee, he couldn't speak, every physical handicap was corrected. Because it says they saw, they stood, and they heard. And they spoke. What happened? And the Gemara tells us that despite the impurity of the Eitz Hadas and the ancient serpent who infused spiritual pollution within Chava, which created all this blockage, it was vaporized at Sinai. Because when you're exposed to that level of the Shekhinah, God's presence, there's no such thing as blockage or lack of perfection. Everything was restored to the way it was supposed to be. That was then. You didn't need somebody to come influence them. God's presence just removed every handicap, every blockage. Mashiach, understands not God. Removing the evil inclination is not God's presence. God's presence is not there. As it says, there's no longer Shiv and Malchus. We're no longer under the heel of the nations of the world. The evil inclination is not there. But who are we? We're the same people of the past. Right? The Rambam writes in Hilchos Tshuva that why is the action of the Baal Tshuva so special? Because as much as he did Tshuva, he still has to live with his past. He has his demons. So his challenges, even if he becomes Baal Tshuva, are greater challenges than that person who's a tzaddik all his life. because he developed certain addictions to negative, the things which are negative, antithesis of Torah. The tzaddik doesn't have to deal with that. When Mashiach comes, we still have those issues. We may not have the desire, but we have a limitation. Person who had an accident and became an amputee, he doesn't have his arm. It's not going to help him. He don't learn as the HR. He only put his hand in the machine because he desired something. But this is post facto. It's after that. He lost his arm. We will exist when Mashiach comes. That's post facto our lives that we lived before. So even though we don't have the Yetzer Hara, we don't have the evil inclination, but we're still handicapped because of our lives, the way we led them before. Therefore, you need greater wisdom of Solomon, and you need a person who's more spiritually attuned, which is nearly the equivalent of Moshe, to make the difference. In spite of all the limitations, he'll be able to lead us as we should be led.
Rabbi, this
Like that, Yecheskel, there's a haftorah we read. It's called the dry bones.
Valley of the Dry Bones, Ezekiel, Cheskel.
Yecheskel resurrected those 22,000 people. Elisha and Leo resurrected, brought Tchias Mason twice. Why? Because Hashem wants to give us a little eye opener of what's meant to come. People say, how could you have resurrection? Not possible. It's possible. He gives us something to hang our hats on to the future. As much as people say it's impossible, we know it's possible. It was part of a Masorah. It happened. If it happened, it's going to happen. Trump, what he did, even before he became the president, it's like you had fog and smog and stuff in the atmosphere, which was literally toxic, that we're going to be asphyxiated with it. All of a sudden, a gale wind comes through, hurricane winds, blows it out within 24 hours. And you have a pristine environment. You can breathe. You think you're in Colorado, up on top of the mountain. That's how quickly it happened. The change of existence changed that quick. The political, the perspective, value, everything. So if Trump can do it within a blink of an eye, relatively speaking, when Hashem says Mashiach, you don't think it's going to happen. So this is a forerunner to give us an inkling of how quickly that change is going to take place.
Rabbi, isn't there a concept?
Years ago, very few white people had tattoos on their arms or their bodies because it wasn't part of our culture. It was part of the African culture to tattoo their bodies. It has to do with paganism, tattooing one's body. That's what it says. You're not permitted to tattoo yourself. The only people who had tattoos years ago were sailors. A sailor had tattoos on his arm. He traveled the high seas. Most of his life he was on the ship. He wasn't part of society. So many years ago, there was a young man who was a Jew. He had tattoos before tattoos were in style. And he was part of a gang. Terrible. And fast forward 30 years, and this rabbi knew him, and he's visiting Israel 30 years later, and this person comes over to him, humble, gentle, docile personality. He says, Rabbi, how are you? He says, do I know you? So he rolled up his sleeve, identified himself. He had a tattoo on his arm. And immediately realized it's the same person. This person who was literally seemingly from the dregs of society. There's no way, this is a hopeless situation. There's no way he could ever come back. And here he's a dedicated Jew with a family, proper beliefs, proper perspectives. It's like, you can't believe it. What about tattoos? That's all superficial. That's superficiality. It's only skin deep. It's not the essence of the Jew. We go off. What brings us back? You just have to reactivate the system. You have a computer, the case is damaged. But if the hardware and software is not damaged, if it works perfectly and it's able to accomplish things that you can't believe, but it looks like a piece of junk. It's a banged up box. But look what's in the box. That software and hardware can bring about levels of understanding which humanly that brain can't come upon that level of understanding. That's exactly what's going to happen when Mashiach comes. You have the scars, but despite the scars, despite the blockage, you have the clarity, you have the understanding, and you're on the right path. Somebody asked me this question, which was a very good question. And the answer is definitely the correct answer. The Torah tells us this negative commandment, Lifnei Iva L'Sito Michshol. You're not permitted to put a stumbling block before your fellow Jew. Because you never know. For instance, a person is an Nazarite, he's not permitted to drink wine. You're not permitted to offer him wine. And even if he wants to buy wine from you, you didn't even initiate it. You're not permitted to sell it to him because there's a chance he may drink the wine. You're not permitted to put a stumbling block before a blind man, meaning because his level of temptation may cause him to cross the line. So the person asked me a question, what's life about? Life's challenges. Hashem created an evil inclination who's continuously trying to trip us up. And it's no let up, 24/7, every moment of our lives. So if God presents life as Lifnei V'Yolositi and Michshol, the whole life is Michshol. We have pitfalls, it's a minefield. And yet it's okay. Evidently it's okay because that's the real of existence. So why can't we create similar situations? By creating challenges to someone else? And it should be a mitzvah. As God, it's a mitzvah. Because if he's able to withstand the challenge, that means he's a tzaddik. That's the question the person asked me. The difference is, as I once said, a challenge is only a challenge because you're able to contend with that challenge. When God gives every one of us a challenge, we have the ability to overcome that challenge and to succeed and not to succumb. When we present a challenge to someone else, you don't know if that person has the capacity to overcome it. So as a result of that, what are you doing? You're creating a setting where he may fail. You have no right to do that. When every setting God creates, the person definitely could succeed if he chooses to succeed. When we create these settings, you don't know if he's going to succeed. Therefore, it's beyond the challenge. Therefore, that's a Torah violation. That's putting a stumbling block before a blind man for that reason.
Always a great answer.
We went to Rav Shach. I went years ago, and I went with Ira Renner. Rav Shach said to him, what do people celebrate birthday parties? They have birthdays. Person has a 70th birthday. Everybody's excited. And they blow out 70 candles, right? Even though half the people have emphysema. They can't breathe to blow out the candles, but they try, okay? So they have the housekeeper put out the candles because, they don't have the breath to blow out the candles, okay? So Rav Shach says, what is a birthday? What are you celebrating? If the birthday is a milestone, looking back what I've accomplished, that's what to celebrate. But if a person has 5 years to live or 10 years to live, does a person celebrate that he has a few years to continue? You have plenty to worry about. What are you celebrating? So he said, a person in his whole life, every Saturday he goes to the beach and he has his dog. And they play soccer on the beach. That's what he has to show for his life. Now he's 70 years old and his grandchildren are there. What are they celebrating? That the grandfather's going to check out in a few years. But a person who's accomplished in his life, some things which are significant and value, that's called the celebration.